opportunity to fish the World Series, which in the very beginning was based out of Delacroix, Louisiana, which a lot of people kind of consider the redfish capital of the world. It is a great fishery. I'm not going to say that Texas doesn't have as many fish, because I know it does, and I've had great success here too. It's just a little bit different in the way we fish there. It's all marshy, softer bottoms. We've got large bays and then small types of areas as far as estuaries, tidal estuaries, and ponds and that type of fishing. So it's different. My success pretty much comes from sight fishing. And as I was in college on the West Coast, I did a lot of salmon and steelhead fishing, and I did a lot of fly fishing. I worked in Montana, so I carried a lot of that over to Louisiana when I came back, and I became a guide, and I was doing a lot of fly fish guiding. So anybody who's ever kind of done sight fishing or fly fish, you know that obviously you're back there poling and you're seeing fish and you're trying to point them out to your clients. So a lot of my success has come on the ability to be able to see fish, make them out even in the toughest of days, overcast, try to discern which fish is a good fish versus a small fish. A lot of people can see fish. It's not the most difficult thing, but it's what you key in on and how you learn the areas where these bigger fish come that actually give you the success. So depending on where tournaments are, the slot range is totally different. So Texas, obviously our slot is 28 inches. And the way we measure them a lot of times, it kind of pushes the envelope that you might have to use your call tag, because that fish may be a little bit on the line. Actually, if the Texas Department of Wildlife came up and pulled you over, you have to be a little bit careful with that. And I've seen that happen to a few anglers. It's cost them some money. So during that Bassmaster tournament, which that was on the Laguna Madre right there, and as you can see, it is I'm a team player. I'm actually netting my partner's fish there, so you got to have a good partner to have success. We had a couple of fish that were on the button that we had to use our call tags for, just to be safe, just in case we did get pulled over. That was a 2 fish per day tournament alive, as most redfish tournaments are. All of our fish have to be brought in alive. So that's a whole different set of things that kind of come into play if you have fish that are struggling, how to maintain fish in live well. We can talk about that a little bit, because that all plays in part to the success of winning these tournaments. A dead fish is a half-pound penalty. Certainly, I've lost tournaments by ounces, much less a half a pound, so you got to be real careful with that. But that was a tournament that we qualified through by winning the last World Championship that we won back in 22. We got 3rd this year in the World Championship. It actually was out of Lake Charles this year. Great tournament. We made some long runs. I had the pleasure of being on Team Mamba, so I had one of the Waypoint Custom 22.7s. And that boat's been absolutely incredible. I've only actually fished it in 2 tournaments so far. It's a relatively new boat for me, but again, all these things culminate to kind of give you good success in these tournaments. But like I said, from the beginning, I became a sight fisherman through fly fishing. And it became a passion, because to me, sight fishing and stalking redfish on the flats is one of the most intense things you can do. I grew up catching a lot of big trout in Lake Pontchartrain when we had a real good trout fishery. Plenty of 8-9 pound trout back in the day, and that fishery kind of started to go sideways a little bit, and I went back to the red fishing and the sight fishing. And anybody here who's a deer hunter or likes to stalk things, sight fishing is kind of one of these things you can super enjoy, and it never gets old when you see these fish swimming on the flats and you're pitching to them and you're making them eat. So it's kind of an important thing, being able to find the fish, find the water, read the tides. Tides are a huge thing. Redfish are a tidal fish. They generally kind of get more active on a falling tide, although you can definitely catch them on an incoming tide. But the falling tide tends to bring the bait out on the flats. You're going to catch them out on the outer edges of ponds and creeks, and that's where they're going to kind of be established to start doing their feeding. I kind of said it a little bit, and I alluded to it, that the fish that we catch in these tournaments aren't all the same. There's fish that kind of stay in a residential area, especially in Louisiana. We have a lot of freshwater. Which is a lot different from Texas, although you do have some freshwater areas. But those freshwater fish tend to be a little bit bigger. I'm not going to necessarily say that the genetics are different, although it may be, but they just tend to be a much higher back fish, shorter tails, rounder tails. The fish that come in out of the ocean and out of the bays tend to have these larger forked tails. And those are the fish you want to stay away from in tournaments, because if you're trying to measure these fish with those long tails, they're going to be squeaking just over, and it might be an 8-pound, 28-inch fish, where I can go back into some of this fresher water and I can catch a 10-pound, 27-inch fish. So that's the kind of things that we look for, and we try to focus in on that. I think the keys of success for us, my partner Eddie, he is a guide full-time. I no longer guide, but I do still have the captain's license. I take friends, family, you know, just anybody who wants to fish. I love to give them the experience of trying to catch some fish. I'm based out of Venice, Louisiana, is where I kind of call my home waters. My partner Eddie knows Delacroix and Buras and all these other areas well. And again, we've had the pleasure of being able to fish tournaments all the way down from Matagorda all the way up to Georgetown, South Carolina. So if anybody happened to watch that last Bassmaster, you may have seen me posing in my underwear as I was pushing a boat out as I got stuck on a sand flat. So I'm more known for that one than I am actually for a lot of my wins, but you know, it's okay, it happens. To the best of us, you know, it's those things. It's all about making the proper decisions, and it doesn't always happen, right? But yeah, the tournament fishing isn't for everybody. It's fun. There's a lot of reward out of it. Obviously, winning always, you know, takes the, you know, top shot. But it's about the camaraderie. We fish a lot with the same people. We deal with a lot of the same companies, and that's all part of it. It's about making these relationships with people that you enjoy being around. And as I said, you know, being on top, you know, as we have for the last 4 years, definitely feels good. And the ultimate is what you want to do. You want to try and win. You know, you learn the waters by spending time, as I said. It's a lot of time on the water. I wouldn't, you know, just ask anybody just to show up to a blind spot and say, hey, good luck, you're going to go catch some fish. Although there's some places where you can do that pretty well. I mean, Laguna Madre, you get on a proper bite and you make some right drifts, you can certainly catch some of the right fish. You know, Delacroix and some of these areas that we fish are a little bit different. It's kind of forced entry. We're kind of getting into some areas that are kind of tough to get into. We're using a lot of the trolling motor. We're still stalking these fish. Whereas on the Laguna Madre, most of the time, it's kind of a no trolling motor deal for us, which I think you guys know if you've ever fished it. It's a lot of big, long drifts, wind drifts. You know, I use a drift sock occasionally. And as we were fishing this tournament, it was no towers. So it was all a lot of blind casting. We happened to find these fish as we were doing it kind of in a zone in the Laguna, in the upper Laguna, that basically every time we'd go through this within about a 20 or 30 yard section, we were catching fish. And we had a straight line. So we're using our maps and our GPSs to kind of mark these fish and know where we were in real time. So every time we got into what we considered the zone, we kind of really keyed in and started making a lot more casts, being aggressive with working those baits. And obviously it paid off. We had some other excellent anglers that were literally within 100 yards of us fishing that same zone. We happened to get bit right. We didn't have any fish come off. You know, and I say that a lot. There's a lot of excellent anglers out there on tour. I think it comes down to execution. You know, you don't want to lose fish. You don't want to have failure with equipment and boats. So you got to take care of all of that stuff as you're preparing for this, you know, tournament. A one-day tournament can be anybody's tournament. I mean, generally, there's a lot of luck that goes into this, getting the right baits, you know, seeing that one really good fish that happens to eat, and he happens to be a 9.5 pounder. But with that, you've still, you know, got to bring those fish in, you've got to keep them alive. But a one-day tournament could be anybody's game. A two-day tournament, you've got to work at it a little bit. You've got to make sure you treat your fish right. You don't beat up too many in the first day. Have multiple spots. Kind of figure out what your competitors are doing while you're on the water at the same time and say, okay, we got to be a little careful, maybe not go to our A spot first, as we know a lot of boats might be passing us. So there's some strategy involved. 3-day tournaments, again, then you're just kind of getting further down the line. It's kind of a tournament of attrition at that point in time. You really have to focus in. Every cast counts, every fish counts. 4-day tournaments, same thing. So up until last year, my partner and I had the pleasure of being the only guys. We had won every 4-day tournament that had ever been done in RedFish history. So I had one of my other partners that I've fished with in the past, Fred Myers, with his new partner. They won the world championship, and then they turned around and did a repeat and won the Bassmaster. So that was pretty awesome for them. I had the pleasure of doing that. It was just fantastic feeling. So I was happy for those guys, being good personal friends of mine. So, but I want to kind of turn some things over. If you guys are, you know, some guys are wanting to do some tournament angling. I've also done trout tournaments. I've done a lot of offshore tournaments. I go to Guatemala every year and fish billfish. So I do it, you know, as much of a high level as I can because I enjoy it. I love fishing. I love conservation, taking care of the fish, talking about those kind of things. So I'm here to answer any questions. If anybody has questions, please fire away. I've got a bunch of stuff to give away up here, so I want to make sure everybody tries to get something here, and we kind of go from there. So does anybody have any questions for me or anything along those lines?
So you mentioned that you do a lot of fly fishing.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm doing is the school spreads that I'm normally around with around the 35 to 43 inches. What weight of a rod would I prefer if I want to get fly fishing those school spreads?
Got it. That's a good question. So primarily I'm an 8-weight guy. I think an 8-weight can handle most things. I've caught 40-pound fish on 8 weights my whole life, 20-pound tippets. Just kind of depends. Now, it depends on how well you can load that rod, and obviously in windy days you might want to step up to a 10-weight just to try to, get your presentation better. Our fish in Louisiana, honestly, if you can throw 30 feet and you can be quiet, you're going to catch those fish. Texas, a little bit different, I think. Sometimes you have to make a little bit further cast, especially if you're on the school fish, because you got to be real careful. As soon as you hook those school fish, they're going to kind of spread out on you. So, but 8 and 10 is always a good one to have on the boat. The 10-weight may be a little easier initially for you to load up just because it's a heavier weight forward line. But the 8, I think, is going to give you a better, lighter presentation coming to it as your fly is, dropping in front of their face, and go from there. But either one of those will be able to handle that weight of a fish, so long as you're kind of in a good area. So I'm doing that. Any other questions for anybody? Let me give you some stuff here, brother. Come get you a hat after when you get done. Anyone, any hat you want?
Another hat.
Oh. Here. Give him those right there. All right.
Hi there. I've just recently started doing some tournament fishing. I noticed you and Eddie have been extremely consistent and doing well. And I was curious, kind of a two-part question. One, is there anything maybe that you would base y'all's consistency on? And then the other part I'm a little curious about is the pre-fishing. How much pre-fishing do you guys do, and how close is it to the actual event?
Very good. Again, I kind of said that success comes in limiting your mistakes, spending your time on the water, which is going to also be the scouting time. So I do have a full-time position job and outside of fishing. It's not quite that successful for me, but it has been good to me. But I try to at least give myself a good 2 weeks beforehand. And it's not just the weekend before. I try to get out during the week, and I try to avoid and evade some of the other anglers. Everybody's always got a target on your back. It's like, ooh, there's Sean or there's Eddie. And, not that that means anything. You still got to catch them. So even if someone sees us, you still got to, execute. But yeah, at least 2 weeks. Now for the World Championship and some of that stuff, I'll start scouting a month before, because again, I might make a 100-mile run or a 150-mile run to go catch a couple fish just to get away from the people that are kind of close. Been fortunate with that Mamba boat. They custom built that. It's got 80 gallons of fuel, averaging about 24 gallons an hour fuel burn, but I'm running pretty quick, about 74, 75 miles an hour. So I can make up some time to get to these areas. So for the World Championship this year, I started scouting about 100 miles away a good month and a half beforehand. And I kind of found some fish I kind of concentrated on. I'd go back and just gently check on them. I meant to talk about that because I watch these guys that come in from Florida. And Louisiana can be really prolific, and it's just amazing. And the fish like to eat. We'll catch them from here to you. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And people are just like, oh, it's the greatest fishery ever. But they just can't help themselves when I get around these fish. And I'm watching them post all these videos, and they'll have 20 fish days before a tournament. I'm like, yeah, you keep ripping on those lips, and we'll see what you catch come time tournament day. You got to have some restraint. Toward the last couple of days of the tournament, I don't even put a rod in my hand. I just sit there and watch them. It drives my partner crazy because he's one of those guys, he has a hard time laying off. I'm like, nope, we're not throwing. We're on the right fish. We're going to need that fish here probably in another day or so. So the last couple of days are very important, just isolating, seeing what they're doing, how are they acting. I might throw a bait and just kind of see if they're going to follow, if they want to eat it, but I'm not going to hook them. But minimum on a real tournament that's got a real good purse, I'm going to say 2 weeks. Maybe something a little bit smaller, and I've already kind of done some pre-fishing within the last month and a half. you know, 3 or 4 days beforehand. But it's super important to spend your time in the water if you want to have success. So I'm gonna give you a special prize since you're an up-and-comer. This right here is one of my custom rods made by Rain Shadow Batson Enterprises, and it's all about your equipment, guys. I mean, it's not everything is created equal. This one was made special for me. It was an RX-10 blank. It's a full carbon blank, very, very light. We can pass around, let people feel it as we go. But I had some issues with the neck surgery, and I've got some weakness in my hands, so I've been very fortunate that those guys put those together for me. But you can kind of feel it and pass it around. Very special stick, but that's for you, my man. I appreciate the question. That was a good one. So any other questions? We had one over here, a couple of them. Here you go, guys.
One over here.
Yep.
I have a question if you have a correlation between the size of the fish and the size of the bait that you're using.
Good question.
And also in your experience, if you caught most of your largest fish on paddle tails or top water, if you could get into that a little bit.
Excellent, excellent. Really good question. I'm a match the hatch kind of guy. I really like to natural bait wise, and I tend to be a weedless. My partner fishes a lot of jig head, obviously a lot of swim baits. But again, when we're actually sight fishing, I'm going to throw I throw a lot of crawfish, believe it or not. So Louisiana, since we have the river estuary, we have a lot of crawfish. I even caught them in the Laguna Madre on the crawfish last tournament I fished, believe it or not. And the one that I prefer is honestly a Berkeley power bait chigger crawl. And I was going to explain to a few people, and I'll pass you this bait, but it's all about rigging properly on a weedless hook. And I think a lot of people that rig weedless tend to put too big of a bait on a gap hook that doesn't quite do it, so it affects your hookup ratio. So this is a 4-aught. This is actually by JRZ Lures that are here, and they've got some really good stuff. And this is one of the rattletail swim baits from another group of guys. But this is a bait that I fish quite often when I'm targeting and seeing fish. It throws very flat. I can actually take and I can make it heavier by putting a tungsten weight with a bobber stop up top. So I get a little more action, a little more weight for throwing through the wind. But the action on this is absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to pass this off to you, and I'm going to give you some baits. That's an awesome question. Top water, spoons, things of that nature all make a difference when you can't see the fish, or when you have, you know, cloudy days, overcast days, dirty water. You're just trying to cover water real fast to kind of locate things. Yeah, I'm going to pull out a top water just to kind of locate fish. I did it in this tournament. I happened to catch an 8.5 pounder that last day of the tournament and that morning on the Laguna Madre. And I'll never forget, my partner's like, "What are you going to do with that?" I was like, "Well, you just get ready, because I'm going to bring them to us." So literally wide open on TV, I see a splash, I take that top water, I work it to me, and that fish comes up behind and absolutely crushes that bait. And we got him in. It was just a monster redfish. It just kind of set the day off. But yeah, it's condition dependent. I'm not a large bait guy. You know, if I'm fun fishing for bull reds, obviously, yeah, I'm going to throw some bigger baits. For my slot baits, for my slot fish I'm not fishing anything a whole lot bigger than what you're in your hand right there. So yeah, so again, match the hatch. I'm a little more of a natural guy. Redfish love crabs and shrimp. That's just a known thing. We don't have as many shrimp here, you know, in Texas like we do in Louisiana, so it's a little bit different. So I think that, you know, crabs still work, even though you don't have, you know, it's a smaller sand crabs or whatever you guys have here, but I've opened them up and they have plenty of them in their stomach. So awesome question as far as that goes. But match the hatch, top water, spinnerbait spoons. When you don't quite have the sight conditions you want, you're just trying to cover water and try to find them.
How do you work it?
Oh yeah, the top water, and that's something that's going to be interesting too, because I do vary my rods with the baits that I do. So the rod that you guys felt right there, that is one of my true sight fishing rods. It's going to be a faster action on the tip, but I'm literally seeing that fish eat. So I can time it, I can pitch it, and when he eats and I know he has it, I can set that hook and he's there. If I'm throwing a top water, a spinnerbait, or a spoon or something where I'm not actually seeing that bite, I change the flex of my rod drastically. I'm going to a moderate flex rod that's a lot softer. Because if you have these stiff rods, and everybody wants these extra fast tip rods, well, I can tell you that you're going to lose a lot of fish when you're blind casting, you're feeling that bite, because you're going to set the hook so fast that you're literally loading it up so fast you're pulling the bait out of the fish's mouth. So some of you guys that are big trout fishermen like soft bites, softer tip rods are going to be better for actually success and, you know, getting a better hook set. Because again, those stiff tip rods are not the ones that you want when you're actually out there kind of working a bait slow, Spinnerbait, all my bass buddies, same thing. Top water baits, moderate flex rods. They come up and they hit it so violently, you got to kind of just have a nice soft rod that's going to flex and kind of give them a little bit so you get a good hook set. So I equate a lot of my gear, a lot of my tackle. So when I'm out there and I'm bringing 6 rods, it's not all same 6 rods. I bring 2 of those. I bring 2 that are a little bit longer, 7'6" and moderate flex for really making long casts on top waters or spinner baits or spoons when I'm blind casting. So think about that when you're looking at rods here. Feel the moderate flex rods. We can show you some of that stuff at the Batson booth. We can go through all of this. But I promise you, when you kind of take those tactics, depending on what type of style of fishing you're doing, it can give you a higher hookup ratio and more fish, truly. Good question. I'll get you some more stuff. Come up.
We have custom rod builders over at the booth as well. So if you have questions, you can come over and ask them.
Well, my question was, I'm in the market today for some rods, and you just answered a lot of them by talking about the popping corks, and Johnson Sprites is probably my 2 favorite baits.
Thank you.
But now that I'm looking at this rod, I've never seen one with the eyes going around twisted. And I kind of like that line being on the bottom with your rod right
That's
side
right.
up.
You got it.
Is that the point?
So we call that spiral wrapped or acid wrapped, and a couple of reasons I like that. So when you actually load the rod with that fish, your line never touches that blank. It never ever touches that blank. Where in a straight rod, depending on how many guides you have, you can actually make contact with the rod. The other thing, same thing, as I cast, I'm doing these long casts, because again, sometimes I've got to throw, I'm seeing a fish way over there. The fact that the line does not touch the blank and it stays straight, I'm actually extending the distance of my cast. And it's truth, I mean, I can just tell you. So my partner there is very competitive, as much as I am, and when I'm out casting him, he doesn't like it. So I got him fishing those blanks now, by the way. So, but the other thing too, when we're working baits, when we're not necessarily sight fishing or seeing something, you ever been tip wrapped before? Especially with braid, as limp as it is, right? Well, you get a big redfish to eat and you're tip wrapped, guess what? That rod's history. That one right there, it actually pulls drag like a spinning rod because the main eye is facing down, but when you tip wrap, it actually just pulls right off. So there is more to it other than just looking cool. There's a lot of technology built into that, and we can discuss that. And again, come by the booth, we'll talk more about flexes of rods and kind of how that works and go from there. So, but there is a little bit of science into that. So, questions? Yeah, well, that, and I do get some distance too.
So I guess with having so much more time with experience in tournaments and tournament angling, for some of the younger people in the crowd, some of the people who are starting to fish, with what you know now, what would you tell your past self when you first started fishing?
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
What would you tell your
What
past
would you
self?
tell your younger self or younger anglers some advice that you want to know now?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think I used to be crazy on the water. I never thought there was a spot that I couldn't get. I think taking your time and being a little more methodical. You know, as you're younger, you think you're bulletproof, what have you. And I spent a lot of time out there, but the biggest joke is that Sean drives by Braille. So I feel the bottom, right? It's not necessarily the right thing to do. So, but I've learned to treat the areas a little more gentle. You know, some things I did, destroying the marsh a little bit. Those are things I kind of regret doing when I was younger to learn things. But just like I said, slowing down, taking in the big picture, not wearing my fish out. You know, if I know they're there, you know, I've learned that through the years. Take it easy on them. You know, like I said, just slowing down and just taking it all in, thinking about it, putting a bigger picture together of what's actually going on. My bite was good on this day. Why? What was the tide doing? What was the pressure? All of those things culminate to successful fishing. Okay, my fishing wasn't as good this day. Why? What changed? So I look at all of that now, where before I just went out and I was just winging it. And I had some good success. I got lucky. But when you actually take and you put the science of it together and you kind of use that to kind of make your days better, it's a big difference. So that's, I think, the biggest thing. You learn as you go on, and I've learned to put the bigger picture together to formulate a better plan.
Hi, question. You talked about sight fishing.
absolutely. All you guys ask questions, and I got plenty of stuff up here, so please come up here and get some stuff from me when you get done. So, yeah, you can't catch what you can't see. So I will tell you honestly, I was with Maui Jim for a long time, and they make some of the best glasses, and that they can. They recently got bought out, so they dropped most of their angling staff. Things happen. So I'm now kind of working with Baheo. They make some great glasses. I know Red Tail Republic makes a phenomenal sunglass as well. I like an amber, okay, for the contrast, okay? Green lens amber tends to be, and that was one of the Costa glasses forever that everybody wanted, was a green lens amber. I was a straight amber for years. I will tell you that there's some companies that make 100% UV protectant, higher light transmission lens for low light days or early morning. Okay, if you put on your dark ambers in the morning, you might not quite see as much as you want to until the sun comes out, right? So your eyes will, equilibrate to what's going on somewhat, but a good pair of sunglasses if you're sight fishing, if you're doing anything, if you're on the flats and you're, looking for trout. I mean, I'm out there in Texas all the time and I see these monster trout swimming around, but you learn what you pick up, but certainly a good pair of glasses and good polarized lenses that you get used to. I will tell you that eye color has a big difference. I'm a fairer skin. I've got, blue eyes, so I like a little bit darker lens that takes some light out. Other guys might like a lighter lens because you kind of block out some of the more light that we're used to. So it's just really what what really suits you. But I will tell you that I think amber is probably the one that is probably used about 80% of the time amongst most of the tournament anglers I know.
You talked about tides being real important, and I know that could be a whole speech, but
yeah.
Can you kind of give us like bullet points?
100%.
And then also your favorite fishing superstition.
Bananas.
Yeah, tides are huge. Louisiana is very tidal. Mississippi River, Venice is very tidal. So what we usually find is, and you try to tie this, and it depends on the fishery, and I know that Laguna Madre is more of wind that is kind of, predicts what you're doing there. You do have some tidal movement, there's no doubt, but it's not as much as what we deal with. But generally the start of the tide, all the way up to the point to where the slack tide are usually two of the best points of fishing. So right when it's turning, I tend to get a real aggressive bite. And what happens as that tide's falling, and you'll see, is that it pulls a lot of the clean water out of the big grass flats. So you might have brown water here, but after about 20 minutes of falling tide, you're gonna have one nice clean channel that goes all the way along this grass point. I can guarantee you that fish are coming in out of that dirty water and they're feeding, and that's where you wanna focus in on. So as you're going, you're looking, look for these clean water runs. Look for the slick water run versus some of the kind of windblown stuff. I can guarantee you that's probably a tidal channel. Or look for some of the bubbles kind of where they're going through. Fish tend to be in tidal areas because it's bringing bait out and that's where they want to culminate. But again, the start of the tide, and obviously all the way through it's going to be good, but then right at the point to where it peaks and it changes just before it turns over and you get that one little slack period, they tend to go absolutely berserk. So you don't always have the pleasure of playing the tide right during your hours of fishing, but you try to look at it and see what it's doing. Again, that Bassmaster we just fished in South Carolina, you only get 3 days of scouting. So I had never been to Georgetown, so we had to really kind of figure things out. And that was a 4.5 foot tide we were fishing in a 6 hour period, which is a lot. I can just tell you that because we're up, on these big grass flats, and then literally in an hour and a half, it looks like Mars over there. There's no water. So that day of the tournament, we skipped for a media day, and then they had a big full moon, and on that Friday, it was a 7.5 foot tide. So everything that we scouted and practiced, there's a 3 foot difference in that same amount of time. And in that first day, we went up a creek, and we're looking, and all these fish were blasting out past the boat, and we're like, man, what's going on? Well, the fish were a lot smarter than these two anglers because they knew to get out of there, and we were about 10 minutes too late, and we're on the trolling motor, and all of a sudden the boat hit bottom. I jump out, I start pushing, my partner gets out, cameraman eventually gets out, and like I said, I got stuck looking like an idiot in my underwear trying to push my boat out on national television. So, it happens to the best of us. I wish I'd have known that, a little bit differently, but that was a great fishery. I learned a lot after all the years I've been doing this. Obviously, I know I'm not going to do that again, at least I hope not. But those are all the things you take to it. But tidal is very important, so always pay attention to it. I don't care if you're jetty fishing, if you're just bank fishing, know what the tides are, know what some of the pressures are out there, and just kind of correlate it to some of your good days. Everybody's got a smartphone, just take some notes, okay? I started taking notes a long time ago. I did this on such and such day, this is what everything looked like. I'll go back and check some tides. And I'm telling you, it helps you build the bigger picture, potentially helps you be a more successful angler. So.
What's your stress level like fishing?
That's a good one. That's another one for you. I used to get real stressed out and angry during tournaments when I made mistakes, right? I've learned to just kind of chill out. Throw caution into the wind. It is what it is. You're going to have some mistakes. You know, don't dwell on it. Get past it. There's always another fish there. Let's hope it's the right one and kind of go from there. But it's still pretty high. We've had so much success and been so, you know, lucky over the last couple of years that it's intense. We always have a target on our back. So honestly, not winning the world championship this year, although we got third, it was good. It was kind of like, okay, I can just go back to fishing and not have to worry about it anymore. So, I mean, it was just, it's a great ride. I mean, I look forward to winning some more tournaments here in the near future. But yeah, just stay focused and relaxed. It's going to help you in the long run. Yep, pass some stuff out. You're the trout guy, right? You're the trout guy?
How much do you change your tactics when the wind's blowing?
Pass those over there, right there. Nope, red. I'll get you some baits as well. Yeah, so the wind can make things very difficult from a couple of standpoints. It puts a riffle on the water, so it can be very difficult to sight fish. I like wind from the standpoint that I can actually use it to propel me on the water, so you can be extra quiet. I'm not a big trolling motor guy when I don't have to be, so obviously the best conditions for me in the morning is going to be a southeast or an east wind because the sun's coming up on my back and I can kind of get on my bank and I can slowly kind of propel down the bank. When it gets real windy, it can be very tough. A lot more trolling motor used. You've got to kind of come around and kind of sneak up on points where you think they're staging and slacker water where you can see. It hurts. I mean, it's difficult. In a place like Laguna Madre now, if you're just doing those big wind drifts, the wind actually helps you. So it just depends on the areas that you're fishing. In marshy estuaries where you're kind of relying on just, you know, spot fishing and bank fishing and looking, you kind of go from that point. But, you know, like I said, the Laguna Madre, I want some wind, at least, you know, probably 10 knots, if not even better. In that tournament, we had southeast wind at 30. The next day we had northeast wind at 30. And on the last day, it was dead calm. So we had every condition you could possibly have in a 3-day tournament, which was just, you know, just crazy. But, you know, you just have to, again, adapt, overcome, figure it out, change your tactics, what baits are you going to throw, kind of go from there. So that does play a big part in what you're doing.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have two more questions left. I have over here.
We'll get you.
We got a few more minutes before we got to wrap up.
What's up?
When you're here, we've got a hard sand.
I'll talk to you about that one. Go ahead, real quick.
When you're scouting an area, how long do you wait? How long do you fish that area before you move on?
Now you've been put in different situations. Laguna Madre, Louisiana. What is maybe your go-to material for fishing line, or what type of fishing line you prefer? And, do you prefer bait caster or spinning or
Gotcha.
How long do you sight before you move on?
Yeah, generally when I'm in an area, I'm not there just by happenstance usually. It's someplace I've either fished or I kind of feel pretty good about that's going to hold some fish. I will tell you that that is a detriment to my fishing. I tend to spend too much time looking at different times, you know, but it can pay off, you know, because it's not the days where you're on schools of 50 or 100 fish anymore. You might be in an area from here to the other side of the show here, and there might be 5 fish, but 3 of them are the right fish. So when I'm looking for the quality of the fish, not necessarily the quantity. So, you know, you learn through years of doing this what you're kind of looking at. So it just depends on what I'm seeing and you know, kind of what I know. But I am guilty of spending too much time in 1 or 2 areas instead of spreading out a little bit and kind of maybe looking somewhere else. All right, yeah, at the end of it, you know, before it turns like, man, I wish I would have gone and looked at this. You just can't fit it all in. As far as, I'm primarily a bait caster kind of guy. I like the bait caster because I can accelerate that cast, especially sight fishing, and I can put it right on the money where I want to. So accuracy is everything when it comes to sight fishing. I always have spinning rods in my arsenal. I do throw popping corks. I'm gonna get you some popping corks here. 4 Horseman cork is a fantastic bait. for doing the conditions that are tough and maybe you're not seeing these fish. So yes, I use a popping cork. I always throw my popping cork on a spinning rod, okay? Again, and we talked about the flexes of the rods. When I'm popping corking, I'm using a moderate flex rod, not a real stiff tip, so a little bit, different. But primarily bait caster, and as far as the line, I'm fortunate enough to work with Tight Line Braid, which is a company out of Houston here. I primarily use 40 to 50 pound test when I'm sight fishing, okay, because a lot of times it's heavy cover, a lot of grass. I've got to be able to get on them and get them in. I'm not a big guy that horses the fish in. I let them kind of do their thing. But on my spinning rods, it's 20 to 30, and I always use fluorocarbon tippet, 30 to 40 pound, depending on what I'm doing. So, and then last question here, this gentleman was asking, about different substrates on the bottom, sand versus soft. Pardon? And oysters. So, the oysters are tough because you got to be careful because you can lose fish on oysters and you're going to get stuck a lot. That whole area in South Carolina we fished, that was all oysters. And we broke some fish off doing that, so you got to be real careful with that. Louisiana is soft mud. You get out, you're going to sink up to your waistline when you try to push your boat out. Obviously, the stuff I was there was concrete. There's a lot of hard patches in the Laguna Madre, and there's also some softer stuff. That doesn't affect what I'm looking for when I'm fishing because I've got to make sense of that area when I'm fishing. So basically, whatever it gives me, I'm going to fish it, whether it be hard bottom, oysters, whatever. I just know that I may change my tactics up a little bit. On oysters, I'm not going to bounce off the bottom. I'm going to suspend my baits a little bit better. Where on the sand, I can actually let that bait sit on the bottom and go from there. So kind of interesting stuff as far as that goes. So, yep. All right, guys, look, I want to thank everybody for showing up. This has been awesome. Stop by the booth. I've got some more baits up here. People, let's come up here and get a few baits, please. And thank you very much. Yeah, go ahead.
We're in booth 238. Directly down here, you see the big bats in.
There you go, my friend. What's that?
40 to 50 pound.
Yeah.
But what's the diameter on it? What would it be by the 8 to 10?
It's about 10 to 12 pound
10 to 12,
test.
but the 40 pound.
In most braids, you can kind of look at it and they'll give you the external OD.